Sound funktioniert auch. Es ist nur ein bisschen arg leise.
Und die Präsentationen selbst werden über USB oder was angeschlossen?
Das machen wir jetzt gleich.
Okay.
Also erstmal ist er nur seine. Und, Jana, könnte ich eben die Präsentation haben?
Ich bin ja bis 15.30 Uhr da. Betrifft es dann nur seine Keynote erstmal oder kommt danach noch was?
Erstmal ein Keynote und einen Kaffee.
Okay.
Ah, das ist das Problem. Ich kämpfe noch ein bisschen mit der Technik, aber ich guck mal gleich, ob deins funktioniert. Aber wir haben noch eine Kaffeepause. Prost. Ach, suchen Sie jetzt.
Das haben wir am Programm so hier, deswegen ist es
Okay.
nicht schlüssig. Ja.
Ist okay. Ja, gerne. Titel, dann ist es so.
jetzt schon starten lassen?
Ja.
Na, das sieht doch gut aus.
Bei dir geht's auch.
Ich habe den Link aus dem Programm, was ich dir geschickt habe. Den oben. Ganz oben. Du siehst bei dir den Programmtag und dann den Link.
Der liegt eigentlich auch. Komisch. Bei mir funktioniert's. Das ist nicht schlecht, wenn es so wahrscheinlich geht. Einstellungen deines Videoworks.
Das heißt, es ist dann derselbe Link? Ist das derselbe Link?
Genau.
Das ist total befremdlich, sich die ganze Zeit
Eingeschränkt. Okay, ich glaube, ich weiß. This is an interactive camera. You can train it with an L gesture,
Ich glaube, du musst aber im Bild stehen, oder?
like so. So before you will be able to start it by an L gesture. Then he will recognize your face.
Do I have to go over here?
You can try.
Yeah, I think you have to wave at it, basically.
Okay, yeah.
Now it will
Yeah.
follow you.
It should.
Okay, well, no. So I actually plan to sit down. Yeah, I'm just going to sit down and get my...
If you want to.
Yeah,
If you want.
because the thing about talks with TikTok is it involves too much stopping and starting videos. You know, you can't walk around with that sort of thing. So is my talk on here now?
Yep.
You know?
After our introduction, we give a short introduction.
Can we go through it and
Yeah.
and have a look and
Wait,
see? Yeah, because
Your presentation?
I need to know how it's going to work with advancing slides and stuff like that. Because sometimes with different versions of PowerPoint, it's a little bit different. Yeah. Okay. So right. Okay. Okay. So where's the question?
In that? Of course, I think it should.
Where's the cursor?
It should be somewhere over here, but
That's the thing. I need that the cursor. If you don't have the cursor, it's going to be very difficult.
there it is.
Wow, it's tricky, isn't it? Okay, let's see. So, do you have presenter's view? Does that work on this computer?
I don't know if we will be able to show it because
Okay.
of the live stream.
That's fine.
If you want to, I can start the presentation so you can have a look at it and
No,
see
no,
how
no,
it
it's
works.
okay. It's okay. We don't need to have presenter view, actually. Okay. Okay, now I need the cursor. Okay, there's the cursor. Okay. So, okay. It's going to be...
Yeah, and that's when you need to know. Let me know when I need to
Okay.
switch switch off the
So,
sound.
um, this one is from a television show.
Okay, so this one, the bakery one?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is probably BBC. Yeah, probably right.
Yeah, British Bake Off.
This is a song.
Okay,
This is a song.
okay.
Yeah, it's all the same song. This should be okay.
Okay.
Should be fine. This is no sound anyway, so it should be okay. This all should be okay. All of this stuff should be okay. Yeah, that should be okay. Should be okay. All this stuff should be okay.
So it's just at the beginning the Bake Off stuff and the songs?
Right. Now, this one. This is for Rachel. There's a song in the background. So.
Yeah, yeah, that's problematic, I think.
So you hear the remix sound behind.
Yeah.
It is a song.
Yeah.
So it's going to,
Yeah.
I think, be a problematic. Yeah. So.
Okay, so what I need to do then to turn off the sound is I would need to come in here and switch it off here. So we need to pause your presentation. Otherwise, the problem is that in the live stream,
Wow.
yeah, I will need to jump in there.
Okay.
Because, yeah, otherwise they will probably turn down the stream.
You can't mute it from any other.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, we'll just do our best.
Yeah, it'll work out. We should be fine.
It'll work out. You don't have an external mouse or anything, do you?
No, I don't think. I can ask Simon.
Aber ich weiß. Hat jemand eine Kabelmaus?
Okay. For this one, I won't play this one because it's just decorative anyway. Just no real point to be made. Maybe this one.
Those ones? That's okay.
So just two. And unfortunately, it's this whole example. It's this whole example. This is for Rachel's example. So we're going to have to just turn down the sound for maybe 3 slides. Yeah, because then that also has a picture of friends in it. Yeah. But I mean, that's a visual thing again.
No, I think that should be okay. I think the problem is in the beginning when you have like multiple videos directly one after another. I don't know how you plan to present that one because in the beginning when you had the bake-off video and the following ones.
Yeah, they're all using the same sound.
Okay, so I can just basically turn off the sound for those 3 with videos, and then afterwards we can turn it on. Because turning it on and off again.
No, they're all using the same sound. So
Okay, alright.
that's the whole point of TikTok, isn't it?
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything in between them.
No. I mean, I will. I'll say 1 or 2 words. But yeah, it should be okay. So yeah, then after that it's okay. After that everything is fine, basically. Yeah, that should be good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can even just say a short sentence in your talk about we need to turn down the sound for a second, so people don't, are kind of
They're not
too surprised.
alarmed
Yeah.
by that. Yeah.
I mean, it should work.
Okay.
So
I will switch the presentation again, so we will have the opening presentation.
we're at Sunrise.
Yes, no, it's that one, in the last one. Yeah.
Presentation beendet.
Yeah.
That makes sense, doesn't it? I like a language that makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Do you have any water?
I think you can get Connie. Ist ein Glas Wasser. She will get one.
That's great.
Simon, soll ich sitzen? Ist es für die Kamera besser? Oder soll ich stehen? Aber dann stehe ich direkt im Beamer.
Kannst du mal weitergehen? Weil ich weiß nicht, wie die Slides sind. Aber das sieht gut aus.
Genau, du kannst die Kamera trainieren.
Ich will, glaube ich, gar nicht. Also ich will mich gar nicht bewegen. Ich setze mich noch mal kurz hin, bevor wir anfangen. Genau, im Beamer. I think so. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I will talk English because we have English speaking guests here. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to Linguistic Talk here in Dresden. We are truly delighted to see you, and we hope that you travel was fine. We have such a diverse group of scholars, creators and enthusiasts here, and to come together to explore TikTok from so many different perspectives. Yes, many of you have traveled a long way, and I hope your journey went smoothly, or more smoothly than my journey went. We are grateful that you made this trip. With this conference, we aim to bring together current linguistic research on TikTok and to foster dialogue between various theoretical, empirical, and methodological perspectives. TikTok has long outgrown its origins as a platform for dance and lip sync. It is now also a space where political and social debates, cultural negotiations, and knowledge transfer and science communication take place. There is so much going on TikTok, but linguistic perspectives remain relatively rare. With this conference, we hope to change that. So welcome to Linguistic Talk. Over the next 3 days, we will explore a wide range of topics. You'll hear talks on TikTok as a space for science communication, on stitches and duets as multimodal reaction formats, on language styles, disinformation, conspiracy theories, mental health narratives, book talk, and even cooking videos. We will also address methodological questions about how to study TikTok linguistically, and we are especially looking forward to our roundtable discussion with creators who will share insights into their strategies and experiences. We would like to extend our warmest thanks to the German Research Foundation, DFG, and the Internationalization Office of TU Dresden. Without their funding, this conference would not have been possible. Many thanks also to everyone who helped with the organization and logistics, especially Constanze Dörr, Sabine Hollmann, Jan Langhorst, Torben Rath, Friederike Fischer, Regina Bergmann, Laura Dremel, and Ulrike Pfeiffer. Many thanks also to the team of RISA e.V. and of course to my co-organizer Simon. And last but not least, thank you to all of you for your contributions, ideas, and your presence here. Okay, before we get started, some practical notes. Here you can see the Wi-Fi login, which you can also find on the wall. The conference dinner will take place tomorrow at 7 p.m. at Altes Wettbüro. All presenters and contributors are warmly invited. Please let Simon and me know until tonight if you want to come and join us. Behind this QR code you can find the book of abstract. You can find our website when you scan the poster. If you have any questions during the conference, feel free to reach out to Simon, me, Constanze, or Sabine. We are here to help and happy to assist. We are looking forward to 3 inspiring days of exchange, insights, and collaboration. TikTok may be fast-paced, but we hope our conversations here will have a lasting impact. It's wonderful to have you all here. Welcome to Linguistic Talk. Thank you.
Okay, so I have to train the camera for a second. It does not work. Okay, so I have to do it. Okay, now it works. So it's a great pleasure for me. Thanks, Jana, for your introduction. A great pleasure to me to welcome our first keynote speaker, Rodney Jones. And please let me start with a personal note. When Jana and I began to plan this conference, I thought, well, compared to other conferences in linguistics, a whole conference on TikTok is quite a crazy thing. So why not do crazy things and invite Rodney Jones as a keynote speaker? Maybe miracles will come true and he will truly come to Dresden, and well, here he is. Anyway, I'm not exaggerating that Rodney Jones is really one of my favorite linguists, with its focus on social linguistics and discourse analysis in and for the digital age. His works have been most inspiring, not only for me, but for many of our colleagues. Rodney Jones is professor of social linguistics at the University of Reading. Before that, he was head of the Department of English at City University of Hong Kong. He is doing research on digital discourse analysis with a special focus on health, digital literacy, and many more. And he's always combining a critical social linguistic perspective with an empirically detailed look at the latest media technologies and spaces. So I'm quite curious what you will tell us today about TikTok. Rodney will give a talk on iconicity, intercorporeality, and embodied stereotypes on TikTok. Rodney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simo. I hope you don't mind if I sit down during my talk, because as with, I suppose, many of your talks, my talk has a lot of videos, and so I need to stay close to the computer so that I can work the videos. So thank you, Simon. Thank you so much. I don't know why you thought it was such a stretch for me to come to Dresden. I'm so happy to be here, actually. It's the first time I've been, I was saying to Anna, it's the first time I've been this far east in Germany, and so I'm just thrilled to be here, and I can't wait to have a chance to look around. So thank you very much for inviting me, and also thank you for inviting me to this really, really interesting conference. I think that what's gratifying about a conference like this is it gives us a chance to explore what linguistics can teach us about TikTok, but it also gives us a chance to explore what TikTok can teach us about linguistics, which is really what I'm going to be focusing on today, particularly around practices of lip syncing when it involves appropriating voices of people who speak differently than us. I do have to start with a warning. Some of the TikToks I'm going to show contain what might be construed as sort of racist stereotypes, and I just want people to be aware that I'm not showing these material to amplify these stereotypes, but rather to challenge these stereotypes. I also would like to alert you that there's copyrighted material in some of my slides, and so I'm going to have to stop periodically for the technician to come and to mute them so that we don't get banned from YouTube once again, I suppose, because I've heard that's happened before. So what I'm going to be talking about is embodied stereotypes, or rather how stereotypes become embodied on TikTok, and perhaps also in face-to-face communication as well. I'm going to look at how people represent, through their embodied performances of lip syncing, different linguistic varieties, different registers and different styles, not just by entraining the shape of their lips to the sounds made by the voice, but by performing with their whole bodies what it feels like, or perhaps what it tastes like to have that voice in their mouths. So here are some examples of that.
The mom from Scotland are always like, an accent so sexy, good accent makes me melt. Does it? Does it? Put your head on my shoulder.
And there's another one.
It's through these embodied performances that creators invoke a negotiation of the distribution of agency between their own bodies and the voices that they're ventriloquizing. Particular characterological figures or social types that are associated with these ways of speaking are also kind of evaluated at the same time. So what these creators are doing is basically taking up what my friend Jürgen Spitzmüller calls meta-pragmatic stances, not just towards the actual people whose voice has been appropriated, but also towards the kinds of people who speak that way. I actually have a German example here. I'm not sure if it works though.
Und so mitsingen und so richtig süß aussehen, also das wäre quasi und richtig süß mitsingen, denke ich mir voll auch, also wenn jetzt jemand neben mir säße, irgendwer, random, der müsste sich doch instant.
So I picked that one because of the code mixing, right? So you can see different kinds of qualia, different kinds of vocal performances for different kinds of languages within the code mixing there. To understand how these processes of standscaping are enacted, though, and how these processes of enregisterment play out, I'm going to be arguing that it really requires that we step out of the semiotic representational framework within which sociolinguists usually talk about linguistic variation and linguistic stereotyping and engage with the sensuous dimension, how the affect of the borrowed voice is embodied by the lip syncer.
Does anybody else have like specific sounds that bother them? For me, it's styrofoam. It's styrofoam. Like styrofoam rubbing against each other. Alright.
Can I just, I have to check the sound because it's coming
It's a
out
little
of this.
Yeah.
I just want to. So it should be better now.
Okay. Good. So, to understand this idea, I'm going to be engaging with the notion of affect. But I'm going to be approaching the idea of affect through three different disciplinary lenses. First, exploring recent work in sociolinguistics by Penny Eckert and her former students at Stanford, exploring the expressive dimension of linguistic variables as they interact with the sensuous characteristics of the embodied voice. From this perspective, affect is realized through processes of indexicality and iconicity. I'll be arguing, however, that what's missing from this view of affect, especially when it comes to the racialized performances of lip syncing that I'll be talking about today, is an appreciation of the power dynamics. And so I turn to work in sociology, language commodification, and ratiolinguistics, where affect is understood in terms of power and the operation of what Sarah Ahmed calls affective economies. But what's missing from this work is an understanding of the way affect fuels the viral spread of these performances across networks, not based on what they mean, but on how people experience them, the kinds of, the kinds of intensities and resonances that scholars of affect studies talk about, as well as the shared experiences of embodiment and intercorporality discussed by phenomenologists. At the end of the talk, I'm going to be suggesting that the one thing that TikTok has to teach us sociolinguists is that explorations of enregisterment and linguistic stereotyping need to focus less on what sounds mean or point to, and more on how they affect and are affected by us as embodied creatures whose bodies are always entangled with the bodies of others. So let's begin with the sociolinguistic perspective, a focus on the way speakers, and in our case lip syncers, embody the sound shape of language through facial expressions, gestures, and bodily movements. Now, scholars working in variationist sociolinguistics are increasingly seeing social meanings arising not just from indexical associations, the kinds of social meanings that phonological variables point to, but also from the way talking looks and feels, and the role of embodied affect expressed through things like articulatory settings, body idioms, play in the invocation of certain social types. So Zhang, for example, has shown how the rhoticity of the Beijing accent produces feelings of oiliness. Calder has documented how drag queens front their S sounds to perform fierceness. Wang has argued that the adoption of the vocal features associated with femininity by Beijing rappers functions to reproduce the iconic record scratch sound of hip hop. And Pratt has studied how creaky voice and postural stillness contributes to communicating the chill attitudes of techie students in a high school drama program. The upshot of such studies is that the social meaning of sociolinguistic variation is created not just through the indexicality of the phonological variables, but also the iconicity of the embodied performances that accompany the production of these variables. From this perspective, lip syncing is not just about mouthing words, but also about communicating their taste through embodied performances of affect. And I have an example of this, but it has copyright material, so we have to pause for just a second here. So this is a Crazy Man, and Crazy Man has basically made his lisp and the way his lisp looks, in particular, a key part of his brand.
Buenos dias. I was going to come on here a couple of days ago or about a week ago and tell you guys thank you so much for 200,000 followers, that is. But you guys so quickly got it to 300,000 that I did not even have time to post that one. So thank you so much for being the best and the craziest ones.
And so lip syncing Crazy Man is sometimes more a matter of tongue syncing. Yeah, so I'll give you an example of someone trying.
Buenos dias. I was going to come on here a couple of days ago or about a week ago.
So as you can see, it's actually quite hard to do this tongue syncing. And so rather than try, some people just, they just wag their tongue.
Buenos dias. I was going to come on here a couple of days ago or about a week ago and tell you guys thank you so much for 200,000.
Or rather than try to lip sync at all, duetters instead try to portray the embodied experience of listening to Crazy Man's voice.
Buenos dias. I was going to come on here a couple of days ago or about a week ago and tell you guys thank you so much for 200,000 followers, that is. But you guys so quickly got it to 300.
So these last two examples actually point to one of the important aspects of affect that I want to focus on in my talk is the fact that lip syncing is always about being a speaker and a listener at the same time, about taking up kind of two affective positions at once, where the lip syncer experiences the sound both from the inside and the outside. With Crazy Man, this iconicity of his lisp is not just realized through his physical performances of it, but also through the orthography of his name and the captions of his videos, where words like sad are spelled T-H-A-D, thad, which is another way, short of lip syncing, that he invites viewers to experience how the lisp sounds in our own mouths as we are reading these spellings. In other places, the iconography of the lisp is separated out from the sound, such as on the banner of his YouTube channel, where Crazy Man is represented simply as a pair of lips with a protruding tongue. And these visual representations of the sound, both in terms of the protruding tongue and the non-standard orthography, are further circulated through the merch that Crazy Man circulates on his websites, so that the sound and the qualia associated with it, not just the protruding tongue, but the affect of campiness associated with it, are recruited in both a micro enregisterment of Crazy Man's personal brand and a more macro enregisterment of the lisp as indexing both a strong Spanish accent and a campy gay personality. The process by which these creators embody sounds in particular ways, stringing them together into narratives about certain kinds of people, and the processes through which their viewers take up their voices in lip syncing performances, where they reproduce with their own mouths the qualia performed by the original creators, not just highlighting these qualia, but amplifying them in the context of mimetic chains, is referred to by Irvin and Gall as remitization, a process that naturalizes associations between semiotic practices and social identities by anchoring them within physical bodies of speakers and listeners. As Irvin and Gall define it, remitization is a process of selection whereby social actors perceive some linguistic or embodied physical features and the affect associated with them as instances of the inherent qualities of individuals or groups, thereby making these features into iconic representations of them. Penny Eckert argues that these two dimensions of meaning, indexicality, what the sound of a particular variable points to, and iconicity, what the sound looks like or feels like in the mouth, are mediated through the dimension of affect, whereby an iconic variable that is seen to express a certain affect or bodily state, such as toughness, can come to index certain social types, such as tough working class men, or going in the other direction, variables that index working class identities can come to seem like natural ways of communicating toughness or anger. In this model, the physical embodied aspects of speech production, like jaw setting, vocal creak, or tongue position, are used performatively to express emotions, stances, and construct specific personas, and thereby participate in the enregisterment of particular linguistic varieties. In fact, as I will argue later, we might even take this notion further, thinking of enregisterment less as a semiotic process and more in terms of intercorporeal flows of affect. Interestingly, on TikTok, there's long been a sense that a person's identity is communicated as much by the physical way they move their lips as the sounds they make, manifesting in these kinds of folk linguistic theories about how you lip sync certain words can give away where you're from or even reveal something about your personality or affect. So let me give you another example of how the iconicity of a sound, the way it looks and comes to be physically performed in lip syncing, contributes to these processes of rematization and enregisterment, and ultimately process of erasalization through these mimetic speech chains on TikTok. So this one starts with a lesson in the pronunciation of American English by an online ESL instructor.
Stop pronouncing the T when you speak English. Don't say identify, say identify. Don't say 20, say 20. Don't say mountain, say mountain. What are some other things about English pronunciation that just don't make sense?
I think my British colleagues would say that doesn't make sense. Later, this video was stitched into another video by a creator named Yong K-ju, who films himself vocally experimenting with this rule and then laughing at the results of his pronunciation.
Stop pronouncing the T when you speak English.
Man, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do.
So this performance, as well as the performer, are associated in the comments with a particular variety of English and a particular racialized persona with remarks like Vietnamese accent unlocked, he suddenly sounds like Uncle Roger, Bro is speaking his own language and you sound like your people now, since Kaiju appears to be phenotypically East Asian, though he corrects the commenter, pointing out that he is actually Congolese. The sound from this video is later appropriated into thousands of other videos in which users contrast their lip sync performances, the phonological contrast between the two sentences, don't tell me what to do and don't tell me what to do, representing the phonological contrast through a range of physical qualia that are remarkably consistent across performances, including a narrowing of the eyes, a tensing and widening of the vocal aperture in producing the vowel sounds, jerky rhythmic head movements, and the exaggerated protrusion and retraction of the neck and chin.
Don't tell me what to do. 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 Don't tell me what to do.
So this graph shows the percentage of these qualia appearing in the second pronunciation in the first 50 videos on the page for this sound, with, of course, videos featuring animals and animations and non-lip syncing performances discarded. So you can see mouth widening and jerking movements of the head appeared in the vast majority, with chin protrusion in about half of them and eye narrowing only in about 20%. One reason eye narrowing, which is arguably the physical trait most associated with this racialized stereotype, is not as prevalent is that it's not directly related to production of the sound or the suprasegmental aspects of the performance the way the other qualia are. But sometimes these qualia were enhanced with filters that exaggerated the narrowing of the eyes and the widening of the mouth. And when animation was used, the contrasted qualia between the two versions of the sentences were represented graphically with the narrowing of the eyes and the tensing of the mouth in the cartoon character. And this multimodal amplification of qualia also shows up in the comments, in which posters describe their experience of lip syncing these sounds as a physical transformation. I went from this to this, which the original creator validates with an enthusiastic show of affect, 5 laughing, crying emoji. In fact, the affective dimension of this example of remitization manifests not just in the affective performance of the phonological features and the characterological figure it indexes, but also in the affect of the performer as he or she experiences their own performance. One of the most interesting parts of this lip-syncing performance is the way Kaju's laughter at the end is also appropriated, but usually not imitated or stylized, but rather seems to be genuine instances of what Goffman calls flooding out. So when positioning themselves as listeners to the voice they just performed, users abandon the racialized qualia and perform their own embodied ways of laughing, positioning themselves as what Flores and Rosa refer to as white listening subjects, by framing the voice they just lip-synced as deviant. This is mirrored in the comments, which mostly consist of expressions of affect communicated through these streams of emoji. But the process of remitization and racialization associated with this meme don't stop here. Later, in response to a comment from a user who suggests another racialized pronunciation, take away the T equals Asian, replace the T with a D equals Indian, Kaju produces a new video.
Replace the T with a D equal Indian? Really? Don't tell me what to do.
Now, while voicing this new pronunciation, Kaiju overlays an orthographic representation of it, accompanied with 2 skull emojis near the top of the video and the words "I can't," followed by 6 loudly crying face emojis at the bottom. So again, the effective performance of voicing the sound is accompanied by an iconic representation of the affect of the experience of performing it. And this performance also attracted even more views than the previous one, as well as even more enthusiastic appropriation by other users into their own videos. And not surprisingly, when users adopted this version of the pronunciation, they perform it with a different set of embodied quality, the most common being the wagging of the head, often associated with stereotypes of South Asian speech, with some also embellishing their physical performance with racialized filters.
Don't tell me what to do. 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 Don't tell me what to do.
So as with the last set of videos, the transformation of embodied affect is entrained with the transformation of pronunciation. So just the movement from don't to dond in most of the lip syncs engenders an immediate raising and tilting of the head, along with a widening of the eyes, and sometimes jocular smile, in preparation for the stereotype performance to come. In this case, not surprisingly, it's the head wagging that is the most frequently realized qualia in these performances, which is a quality which has already been registered as a feature of racist performances of Indian accents. It's the one thing you don't want to do when imitating a South Asian accent, if you are going to imitate one in the first place, which is already a dodgy proposition if you're not South Asian. So, although most of the comments in the video are the same kind of positive displays of affect as those that accompany the first video, some users call Keiju out with comments like, "Isn't that racist?" and "Yeah, real funny, dude. If it was you, how would you feel?" literally mocking somebody's country, here invoking the affective experience of South Asian listeners hearing his or her variety mocked. One Indian-identified poster even demands an apology. "Bro, I'm Indian. I would like an apology. Mimicking accents aren't funny." A demand that Keiju responds to in true TikTok fashion by promising to post an apology video. just made a video apologizing, I respect you. At the same time, he doesn't take down the sound or the original video, and in fact, in another comment, he vows to repost it if TikTok takes it down. In defending his behavior, Keiju uses the logic of decontextualized affect, attempting to decouple his own effective performance. I wasn't mocking any accent, I just got surprised and laughed at myself from the broader historical meaning of laughter associated with mocking other people's accents. A stance which interestingly reproduces an enregistered stance of racists on the internet who use humorous genres such as memes to troll their targets with a kind of symbolic violence which is framed as just joking. Of course, a similar stance has long been evident in offline performances of language mocking as well, perhaps the most extensively studied being the use of mock Spanish in the US, which Jane Hill argues operates through affective stance-taking, where speakers create what Hill terms a jocular or humorous frame that performs a seemingly convivial engagement with linguistic difference, while indirectly reproducing negative stereotypes of Spanish speakers as lazy, dirty, or sexually excessive. This layering of indexical meaning and iconicity demonstrates how affect functions within a complex material and semiotic field where feeling states become vehicles for reproducing social hierarchies. And it is in these social hierarchies that the positionality of speakers as they perform and experience affect that is sometimes missing from these more traditional variationist sociolinguistic accounts of remitization and enregisterment. And that's how affect, iconicity, and indexicality conspire not just to generate meaning, but also to generate power within what Sarah Ahmad calls affective economies, in which affect doesn't just adhere to particular linguistic registers, but sticks to the bodies of those associated with these registers in ways that transform these bodies into objects of fear, disgust, or fascination, while simultaneously concealing the historical and structural conditions that produce these affective configurations. So for this, we need to turn to work in ratiolinguistics by scholars like Flores and Rosa, as well as work done by internet sociologists and anthropologists on the affective labor of social media. In the last example, the focus was on the effective performance of racialization, how white laughter works to support the enregisterment of particular linguistic varieties. In the example I'm going to turn to now, the focus is more on the racialization of affect, how the affect of minoritized people is itself fetishized and commodified, becoming a linguistic resource that can then be appropriated by speakers of dominant varieties in their own performances of affect. An example of this is what is known as digital blackface, which is not just about appropriating black faces, but of appropriating and distorting performances of black affect. This typically involves, as Jackson says, displays of emotions stereotyped as excessive, so happy, so sassy, so ghetto, so loud. Rarely are black characters afforded subtle traits of feelings. Ultimately, black people and black images are thus relied upon to perform a huge amount of emotional labor online on behalf of non-black users. The example I want to give is a very old meme, but it does have copyrighted material, so we'll stop it once again. So this is a very old meme, and those of you, so I guess most of you here the tendency to fixate on particular semiotic objects, the GIF you're sharing, the voice you're lip syncing, without considering the very real people represented in those objects. Notably, they argue that across much of the internet, fetishization is enabled and enables what they call a white racial frame. Among the best examples of this are reaction GIFs, through which, as Kuo puts it, non-black users puppeteer and play act through stereotype representations of black affect, not only normalizing the appropriation of black bodies, but also reproducing the limited ways that these racialized bodies are constituted by and inscribed in discourse. Whereas reaction GIFs co-opt the embodied qualia of racialized speakers to perform emotional labor on behalf of non-racialized users, lip-syncing videos co-opt the voices of racialized speakers into users' own embodied performances of affect. In both cases, the multi-semiotic repertoires of minoritized people and the experiences they have through these repertoires become entangled with other people's bodies, other people's intentions, other people's affective projects. And it's this aspect of remitization that goes beyond the logic of speech chains and the representationalist assumptions behind terms such as indexicality and iconicity, whereby racialized bodies become entangled in webs of intercorporeal relationships with other bodies and with the material semiotic resources that circulate from mouth to mouth. And this is captured by South African linguist Marceline Oostendorp, who argues that it's not just a matter of bodies appropriating semiotic resources or communicating meaning, but of bodies swallowing semiotic resources and themselves being swallowed by them. In lip syncing on TikTok, what this often entails is a swallowing of minoritized voices by the bodies of the white listening subject, which reanimates them through simultaneous performances of what it is supposedly like to speak that way and what it is supposedly like to hear that way of speaking. Which forces us once again to revisit Eckert's diagram, seeing that not only is it not just meaning that is generated in the process of remitization and registerment, but also power, but that meaning and power are not really at the center of the diagram. Affect is. This whole cycle of meaning, identity, power, and prejudice is both generative of and generated by affect. Affect is more than just an ingredient in the production of social meanings. It is what drives meaning. In the end, meaning depends on bodies and is produced not through neat speech chains, but through flows of affective intensities, bodies affecting and being affected by one another, which is what I really think TikTok can teach us about these sociolinguistic concepts like remitization and enregisterment and dixicality, which are ultimately still tied up with mentalist understandings of language. What TikTok teaches us is how the body matters and how the only way to really understand enregisterment is to go beyond thinking about what language means and focus on how language matters and the different ways it gets mattered in different social contexts and different configurations of technological mediation. For this, we need to turn to work in phenomenology and affect studies. In studies of TikTok, there's a growing body of work which draws upon affect studies, using concepts from scholars like Susanna Parsonen to talk about the way the affordances of the platform facilitate affective connections, the circulation of intensities, and the creating of affective resonance. Much of this work is focused on the formation of affective publics in the context of political and social movements. So there's the work of Samantha Haughty and her colleagues on the affective ambivalence in climate change activism, Justin Grandinetti and Jeffrey Berntsema on the role of algorithms in circulating affect associated with conspiracy theories, and in one of the few examples where the sonic dimensions of affect are addressed, the work on activist discourse by musicologist Emma Schrott. But the affective dimensions of lip syncing and audio memes have still not been studied enough, even though there's an implicit understanding, going back to Abedin and Kay's definition of audio memes, that it is affect. That is precisely what makes them different from image macro memes. The way, as Abedin and Kay put it, the texture of the sound takes on an intimate disposition which engages viewers and creators in a more visceral way. One exception is the work of Veronica Mukesh, where she talks about how the sad girl persona is invoked and registered through the mimetic circulation of lip-syncing performances in certain songs. And I'm not going to play this because this has the song Complex in it, but you can look it up on TikTok. There's a whole kind of meme of sad girls singing this song Complex, including shared performances which help to construct sad girls as something of a community of practice on TikTok. It's interesting that most of this work is not in linguistics. It's also not even in media anthropology. It's in musicology. And in fact, the most important work on the affective dimension of lip syncing has been done in the study of drag performances. Crucial to lip syncing, musicologists tell us, is the idea that the voice is both self and other. And in voicing the speaker and the listener at the same time, drag performers create an auto-affective feedback loop, where the experience of hearing the voice and of touching it while performing it reinforce what Beard calls haptic orality. Just as important as the indexical meanings created through different recombinations of voices and bodies and genders is the way the body materializes other people's voices through these careful, intimate, full body practices of listening and performances, which is also what we saw with all of the examples I talked about today. How what lip syncing affords is the entanglement of affect as it is performed by the speaker, as it is experienced by the listener, creating affective feedback loops which drive the remitization of sounds as well as the virality of oral memes. Sociolinguists like Asif Agha see encounters with other people's voices chiefly as a process in which they verbally establish various degrees of alignment or disalignment with those voices and with the social types, those voices, those social types whose voices they take them to be. But lip syncing performances highlight the more visceral way we encounter voices. Voices based on intercorporality of human experiences, where we don't just observe the other's affect, we also experience, where we don't just hear voices, we embody them. Indeed, it may be the intercorporeal entanglement with the other, the embodied experience of simultaneously hearing the voice and feeling it in your own mouth that makes audio memes so engaging and drives practices of memification and enregisterment more generally. For phenomenologists like Merleau-Ponty, intercorporality is understood as a kind of primordial understanding of the other that we experience with our bodies, the phenomena of encountering the other in a way that transcends the self-other binary. For Bakhtin, however, intercorporality is not just the basis of being, but also the basis of embodying meaning. The body is intercorporeal in the same way the novel is intertextual. Just as with intertextuality, we shape the meaning of other people's words with our own. With intercorporality, we shape the meaning of other people's bodies with our own. And in turn, we are shaped by the way we experience their bodies and the way they experience ours. So in conclusion, approaching processes of remitization and enregisterment through the lens of intercorporality helps us to see the comments by Young Kaju that the reason he laughed is that he just got surprised by the way the sound felt in his mouth, helps us to see this comment in a new light. Not as a way to excuse his behavior, but as a provocation to take the recent work on iconicity and enregisterment in sociolinguistics one step further and consider how often it is not meaning or iterative processes of indexicality that drives enregisterment, but affect, the way sounds feel in our mouths, and that might also be part of what makes practices of language mocking so persistent, as they are equally driven by flows of infective intensity and intercorporeal experience. This more effective lens can also help us to understand better the experience of racialized subjects who experience enregisterment and language stereotyping, not as linguistic facts, but as corporeal realities and embodied experiences, what Ustenstorp describes as the experience of swallowing and being swallowed by semiotic resources in ways that don't just evoke evaluation or construct identities, but in ways that render bodies grotesque or, as Farnham puts it, made monstrous, made meaningless. Thank you.
Thanks, Rodney. We're slightly behind the schedule, but
Sorry.
we will have 5 minutes or so for some urgent questions before
Great.
we go into the coffee break. And I will start with the first
Okay.
question. Did you ever do lip syncing by yourself?
I used to do lip syncing all the time when I was younger and doing more drag performances, actually, but not on TikTok. Yeah. But I mean, I think TikTok is quite good because it gives quite a lot of technological support to lip syncing that we didn't have with our own CD players back then. Yeah.
And I was wondering what's new about TikTok compared to YouTube, because we had another audiovisual platform
Mm-hmm.
only already 20 years ago, but TikTok has introduced, in my opinion, two things. It's much easier to do lip syncing and video editing and so on, and we have the vertical screen,
Yeah.
which is perfect for shooting your own body.
Yeah.
Because it's the whole gesture.
It's the shape of the body.
The
It's the
whole
shape of the body. Yeah.
is mirrored in the vertical screen.
That's
Would you
right.
agree about
No,
this?
I think that's right. It's also the platform culture, right? It also is kind of tied up, because sometimes we forget about the histories and how histories of media also influence how they're used. And of course, TikTok came from the app Musical.ly, and Musical.ly was all about lip syncing. Right? That's kind of the main purpose of that app. Yeah.
Any more questions? Jan?
I just had the idea that this is about how this connects to the process of dubbing of TV series or films, because I would assume that that's kind of the same process, but the other way around, because you have the body performance which stays the same, but the voice has to change. So the voice actor who isn't, if we talk about race or something, necessarily of the same race as the original actor, kind of has to perform the voice in a way that the image looks.
I think that's because I was just having a conversation in Bern a couple of days ago with somebody, with Dave Ritten actually, about this very topic, because he was talking about watching Swiss crime series dubbed into English, and how because he's an English sociolinguistics linguist, so he's very interested in the varieties of English they chose. But the interesting thing is, it's not just the variety of the English, it's the quality of the voice as well, right? You also need to pay attention to, okay, does this detective sound like a detective would sound? And then you have to focus on the context as well, which is also something very important about what I've been saying about affect in TikTok, that is always situated, that's always entangled with the social and socio-technical context in which it's used. So maybe that's the way a detective sounds in your country, but it's not the way he's supposed to sound in my country, right? That the qualia are actually going to be different in different historical and cultural contexts. Yeah, so it's a really interesting question.
Andreas?
Yes, thank you for your talk. One question to the affect thing. Do you see, I would phrase it, any danger, maybe if the far right in TikTok in Germany uses this very much, I would say, and I have a lot of memes in my talk when the affect plays a very big role. So one part, the creator, is affected, literally affected, I guess, when they lip sync to, let's say, racist songs, and also makes it easier
it's too late. It's already happened. It's already happened. In fact, I mean, I think this kind of many dimensions of this aspect of affect, and this is why I think it's just so vital that linguists engage with the concept of affect, is this is what's driving, you know, the far right. This is what's driving Donald Trump. You know, this is what's driving the move of so many of our compatriots to it's not about meaning, yeah? Just like in sort of in registerment, right? It's not really about meaning, right? It's about the way this guy makes me feel, right? And the way he embodies the anger that I'm feeling, right? The way he performs, even when he says ridiculous things, doesn't matter, but the way he performs my affect. Yeah, I'm thinking of Donald Trump, by the way, so I guess you got that, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Following up on this, and also going back to the first part of your analysis, what is your position about on the potential racist qualities of these practices, by which the voice of the other is sort of performed in this convergence of the sound material and the body and the written language? So are these things that are endlessly negotiated, as you showed us, or could we as scholars take a stance towards these practices, and should we perhaps also with respect to our teaching, and what do you think of that?
I actually did another study a couple of years ago with my students about precisely this, asking, I employed a bunch of undergraduate university students, and I asked them to, download a lot of TikToks and have conversations and try to write the rules for me, right? What are the norms? What are the rules for when it's okay and when it's not okay? Because clearly there are times when it's okay, right? So, for example, Charlie D'Amelio, lip syncing some rap song, right? That's almost considered like, okay, that's kind of part of the cultural commons. It's a rap song, it's a dance, blah blah blah. It's not a matter of mocking, right? It's a matter of appreciation in a way, right? To more obvious kind of instances of language mocking. And I mean, the thing is, that danger is always there, right? Because whenever we lip sync somebody, it's almost inevitable that we're lip syncing somebody with a different style or register than ours. They have a different voice anyway, right? So we're already violating them, right? I mean, lip syncing is already a kind of form of violation, but in a way I think that's also what makes it so effectively powerful, right? And so that, when you think back to drag, right, that's what drag is all about, right? It's about disruption, right? It's about, chaos, really. It is about violating that other person's voice, and also violating all these kinds of binaries around gender and that sort of thing. So I think that's a kind of inevitable part. So it's, you're playing with fire, right? You're always playing with fire with this sort of thing. But I think it is negotiated in this kind of ongoing way. And the thing about the internet, since it is so participatory, since when I put my TikTok up, I get the comments of the people who watched it, then there's kind of this immediate negotiation going on. Oh, isn't that racist? Yeah, how would you feel if somebody made fun of, somebody else's accent? And having to reply to that, and those and also the moderation that goes on the platform as well, taking certain things down and that sort of thing. But I think it's an ongoingly negotiated thing, and I think that's really interesting for us as linguists. Not really take a stand about, oh, you shouldn't, lip sync in this way or lip sync in that way, but to study that, to study how those social norms develop. But also, I think, in the present political moment, how those social norms change, how the window of acceptability might change. So lip syncing performances that we would have considered racist or unacceptable, 2 years ago, might now become mainstream, in the same way that political speech that a couple of years ago we couldn't imagine coming from, the leader of the free world, now are just kind of, well, they're there, right? So, yeah.
So thank you once again. We have a mache schon Dank. Vielen Dank. Ich habe keine Videobeispiele. Okay, so welcome back to our afternoon session. And the first talk is given by Janina Wildfeuer from the University of Groningen. She will give a talk on multimodal TikTok analysis, slicing canvases and identifying the semiotic patterns of duets, stitches and other features of short video content. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is a linguistic conference and I call myself a multimodalist. So what you will see is will be about many different expressive forms in these TikTok videos and TikTok as a platform, and not specifically focusing on language. I'm very thankful that I can speak here. I know that not everyone is a big fan of multimodal communication, but this will be all about it. So I promised to say something about the multimodal complexity of TikTok videos. I will start with the platform and then zoom in on the TikTok videos themselves. And I will do this by working with the foundational framework for the analysis of multimodal communication that we have been developing in the last years. And then I will also bring in insights from multimodal film analysis, which is my background. I have been working in this field for more than 15 years now. There is quite a lot of work, and I think that some of this is helpful for the analysis of TikTok videos. So it's multimodal film and audiovisual analysis. Okay. I will talk about different examples which are very different. They do not share a genre, they do not share particular features. My aim is to show the diversity and the complexity, mainly with these examples, and I will quickly play them one after the other to give you an overview, and then I don't have to replay them later on again, right? So the first is basically also a recording from my phone.
Hast du ChatGPT schon mal gebraucht? Crazy, was das alles kann. ChatGPT kann mir einen ganzen Aufsatz über irgendein random Thema schreiben. Ich probiere es gerade mal aus. Schreibe mir einen Aufsatz über die Gründung des SRF, eine Seite lang. Es kann meinen Text sogar in verschiedenen Niveaus schreiben, zum Beispiel mit Schreibfehlern drin oder im Jugendslang, und es fügt mir instant.
I think this is already enough to give you an overview. This is a crosscut montage with someone talking directly into the camera, very typical for TikTok, and then cross-edited with screenshots or screen recording from using ChatGPT as a platform. This is from November 23 when it came out. Was it 23 or 24? 23, right? Wow. So very new, and SRF News, the Swiss news channel, presented it on TikTok in this way. This is a completely different video. It's not about the text here or the spoken language. But you will see this is a single shot with additional text inserts and then music in the background, so also very different levels of meaning making, and my talk is about exactly this. So how do these different semiotic modes come together? For the next one I need to give a little warning because you can hear some shout outs and screams at the beginning. No one is harmed. It's about a life-threatening situation. But later on there is a comment on it and the baby is fine, or the kid that you see here at the beginning is fine. So you will hear some screams at the beginning.
This TikTok was the first time I've come across this device. It's marketed as an anti-choking suction device. I've never seen it used or spoken about in any healthcare setting, and there's no proof for its recommendation for use in any choking guidelines. I found one recent systematic review looking at the utility of these anti-choking devices.
Should be enough to get the idea of the typical stitch with the green screen technique, and then he works also with screenshots and screen recordings and a big montage of very different expressive forms. And a final one, which is from Comic Talk, where people, very similar to Book talk about comics. And we found quite a lot of videos in which static material, originally static material, comics material, is being dynamized and cross-cut. And this is one example here. interesting, originally very static material, now here in a dynamized form. There is, of course, already a lot of work also from the multimodal perspective on TikTok, and we have several talks here listed also which have the multimodal in it. This is great, and I'm not here to criticize this. I'm here to, I will try to build a basis for this from a general approach to multimodal communication. So I take one work as an example, this one from Joshua Hahn and Michel Zapavinia from last year. They use rhythm as an integration principle to show how all these resources come together. And that's a good starting point. We need something to show how all these resources come together. And they do this here for this video, which is also a bit of lip syncing actually. There is another one I need to play, but otherwise it doesn't work here.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. The leader of the opposition says that people who hold sexist views and who are misogynist are not appropriate for high office. Well, I hope the leader of the opposition has got a piece of paper and he is writing out his resignation. Because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives, he needs a mirror.
Pay attention. I will say something about this last effect later on, because this is where film analysis comes in. There is a lot about lip syncing, and your talk was great, but there is something else in this video which also does not play a big role in the analysis by Joshua and Michel. They take rhythm as the integration principle to say how different semiotic resources come together, how they are coordinated. You need a rhythm to show how they are aligned and how all what you presented just now works in a coherent way, which is one way of doing it. I think that a bit more is needed to do so.
I will not be
This is what I wanted to avoid. Yeah, there is a lot about how this comes together, and then their conclusion is also that there is a new level and type of multimodal literacy for this. And my question exactly here is, how much of this is essentially a TikTok feature, or is it rather a typically audiovisual feature known from filmic techniques for this one, but also from other media techniques for other videos? And this is my main argumentation. In order to find out what the TikTok specific features are, we need to take a step back and see what the material is and see how it comes together. And for this, we provide a framework. Some of you might know this, or the German version of this, which is green. It's not the blue book, but the green book, in which we also take a step back and look at multimodality by looking at communicative situations very broadly, looking at all the media included in this. And there is one overview which has more than 4 steps, where this way of taking the pieces and looking at the communicative situation broadly and then zooming in is explained. You can hardly see these marks here, but we start with the communicative situation, then look at the media in this communicative situation, and then we work with the term of the canvases. Of a canvas, the material surface on which meaning is made and on which semiotic resources come together. And I would like to show how this works in TikTok videos. This is a bit of theoretical background. I will leave out most of this. We define communicative situations and also give necessary conditions for these. What is important then is that within these communicative situations, there are media, and often there are different media embedded in these communicative situations. And within these media, there are the semiotic modes. So we do not equalize them, and we bring definitions for both of them. And we say that the media, or one medium that is employed in a communicative situation, provides a canvas, and this can be a virtual one or a digital one, on which meaning is created. And it's important to sort out all the media that are involved, and then all the canvases that are involved. And I will show you how this can be done for TikTok. I'll leave that out because we save some time here. In the original book, which is from 2017, there was no TikTok and there weren't even stories and reels on Instagram. So we do an analysis for Instagram postings, which are basically static. And we are currently working on a new edition of this book where we also include TikTok. And for some of you who might know the Instagram analysis from the 2017 book, this is now the new version, giving an overview of the canvases on TikTok, where we first of all look at what we see on the screen, which is the overall communicative situation. And then we zoom in and look at what else is there. We have all of these are different canvases. So the interfaces and the platform menu is already a canvas, which allows us to, get into interaction with the platform, right? So we call this a fully ergodic situation in which the platform reacts to what we do when we click on something. The interesting aspect is that these interfaces are partly ergodic, but then the video content is only ergodic in a way that we have to bring together the semiotic resources. So you see here different color codings for the different canvases, and I will mainly talk about the video content now, because this is already a complex medium, or maybe even a combination of different media combined. So when we filter on, or when we focus on the videos themselves, we also need to do a canvas analysis and see what is happening within this video. I picked out one more video here, which is, let's say, less complex than all the others I showed, but it already has 2 different canvases, maybe 3. Not lip syncing, but audio syncing. Oops. Always happens. Yes. Okay, so when we look at the video only, we do not have the big screen here. We have a crept content, we call this, right? And we already have a typical split screen situation here, which brings together 2 different media, one original video and one new video, and the platform allows us to do that, right? It's the affordances of the platform bringing them together. And then the 2 different media are merging into a coherent whole, also because of rhythm, because the rhythm is synchronized, right? The music is synchronized. And for this, we need to separate these 2 canvases that we see on the audiovisual content, but we then also need to think about how this merging happens, maybe into something, a new semiotic level of meaning making. And we can do that by looking at which relationships are built between these canvases. And we can look at how they relate to each other and create an overall story or idea. And this is exactly what we do when we do a multimodal analysis of other media. How do things come together? How is coherence created? How is cohesion created? How are metaphors built, etc. So if we apply a multimodal discourse analytical perspective here, we can find out quite a lot. And I'm just giving you some more examples from the videos that we looked at. This is the video about the first aid tool. This is Dr. Karanrar, who is quite famous on TikTok for commenting on medical content and medical cases. And we have this typical stitch technique here. And we already saw at the very beginning that there is this verbal insert, which is basically a totally different materiality. So we have already a different canvas on top of this original video that he uses. And then it is cross-cut or cut to this situation here where we have the actual stitch. So when we talk about multimodal patterns of stitches, we can clearly say we have at least 2 different canvases, but that's not enough to say, because we then also have to look at what is going on the audio level, and maybe even more when there's more inserts or subtitling coming in. And here then, this is yet another canvas of a screen recording or screenshot at the in the background, and then the person again before. And here we are only on the level of the video, so we filter out all these canvases that you usually look at when you also have it, when you have the video on the screen, and then look at how these things come together. I'll do the canvas analysis first, and then also give you a bit of multimodal film analysis. My question is, When we look at this, at the videos as media by itself, including even other media types, and especially if we then include media from very different genres, like static media, what do we have to do here in terms of analysis? And that is already what we claim in our book, that achieving clarity of the constitutive contributions of all the materialities included is very important, and the canvas analysis then allows us to do this. And I'm coming back to this multimodal literacy point here. So, appreciating the level and type of multimodal literacy involving basic audiovisual recording and editing skills was once a specialized competency, now becoming more generalized among users of multimedia social media platforms. I say maybe there's even more. There is a bit more that is needed, like knowledge about audiovisual techniques, not only on social media. And then the question is, what kind of literacy is needed here? How much of this is really essentially TikTok specific? And my claim is that we can actually look at what has been done in the context of multimodal film analysis, and also what has been done in the big context of multimodal literacy or multiliteracies. That's already a tradition going back to the early 1990s with the New London Group. I just have two important quotes from Gunter Kress. Gunter has also said something about film, but there is a lot more going on in film analysis. I don't have time to give you a proper overview, so what I will do is listing lots of approaches that are there in this context of multimodal film analysis, allowing to do different things about film, finding out more about which design choices are in these films or in these videos, what are the processes of sign making, and some of them are then looking at particular interest, but also agency, for example. This was also a topic that fits your talk. And it's not about picking out now things, but I will show you a few examples of what we can actually do with this. I said, look at the end of this video, which was a lot about lip syncing and syncing the rhythm, but in the end there was actually a feature that was hardly visible, namely the cross-cut or the hard cut with a transition to a mirrored follow-up shot. It was even hard to catch it in the frames. The person was always shown from one side and talking to the camera, and in the end she actually turned the camera and mirrored the follow-up shot, establishing a contrast. And this contrast that she's bringing up here to follow this Glambot challenge, but at the same time using this misogyny speech from 2012, is what actually brings up the idea here of contrasting this Glambot challenge. So the meaning of this whole TikTok video, bringing up not just a meme here, but a contrast to this idea, only works when you look at the filmic editing techniques here, because then only the contrast becomes actually visible, namely her result showing this contrast. One other example here is we can apply a multimodal analysis of filmic or audiovisual discourse structure and then find out that this whole commentary on this first ed tool is actually both an argumentative structure in which he talks about not using this tool. There is a systematic review on the effectiveness, showing you this is not what you should do, you should better learn first aid techniques. And then in the end, I didn't show that until the end, but you can see it here, he is actually giving the first aid instruction of the Heimlich maneuver for kids by clapping or really using this teddy bear and showing how it's correctly done. So there's a lot of stuff in this video which only comes to the fore when you look into the different materials that are there and that are brought together in, 20 seconds. And for this you need to have tools to show how this structure is built. And here it is the knowledge that needs to come in from visual literacy, from comic reading, how a larger view on panels and pages is usually created on comic pages, by scrolling through the page that was done in the middle, and then the individual events showing in some temporal sequence by zooming in on these panels. And this is done on two different canvases, the static comic pages and the moving edit, and of course the rhythm and the lyrics that is put on top. So all this synchronization and then the dynamism or dynamicity that is coming in is quite a complexity that needs to be identified with a proper analytical method. And this is my conclusion. So we need to see TikTok videos as a conundrum of mainly depicted media. And this is one of the main ideas of TikTok, taking media that are there and reusing them. We need to achieve clarity of these different materialities and their semiotic functions by using appropriate methods, and there's many of them. This is just one. I'm not claiming that this is the right one, so, but it's important to get a good idea of the materialities involved, and to be then able to really define TikTok-specific genre patterns, or patterns in general. A lot more corpus analysis is needed, more quantitative work, and I can point to Mathieu's talk tomorrow, who will show a bit of our corpus analysis in Groningen. That's a lot of work, that's a lot of tiring work, so you're all welcome and invited to join us in doing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Janina. We are perfectly in time, so we have some time for discussion.
Thanks so much. I really loved your talking. I think it's so important to be able to provide the tools for this kind of systematic analysis, and of course this is something that you and your colleagues have been doing for quite a long time. I thought this idea of TikTok kind of remediating quite a lot of filmic techniques is very interesting, and then those filmic techniques, as you say, then coalescing into certain kinds of more specialized configurations of TikTok-specific genres is also very interesting. And I'm wondering what's going to happen when it goes the other way around, right? When the films start remediating TikTok. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's very exciting, of course. I cannot talk about film, but I just watched a theater play for kids on Friday and saw the actors bringing up inset panels on the stage to show little things they are talking about, to visualize them, which is something that is coming from maybe inserts in videos, but also from comics. So it's everywhere, right? These remediation and re-semiotization processes. And that is also a kind of literacy that is needed. My kids couldn't deal with this. They were too young. They haven't read these comic inset panels before, so they were asking, what's happening there? I cannot see it. So yeah, this is our task, I think, right? To identify these patterns and then also teach how they are used, and do that early in school, or maybe even in kindergarten. Yeah.
Any more questions? So I have one. So you put the focus on the multimodal thing, but where's language? You downplayed language a little bit in your talk.
Yes.
And I would like to know what you think about language and the role of language and all this.
Yes. So, well, let's take the example of the misogyny speech. That can, of course, we can of course use a layer of description analysis there only for the language that is used from the speech from 2012, and see what kind of visual patterns are related to this and how there is a relationship. I haven't focused on any of the resources here in particular, but multimodal analysis aims at creating several layers of description to identify the different resources, but always also looks at the interplay, which is the most important aspect for the multimodality approach. So looking at language is perfectly fine. We can do that, and we can use your expertise from linguistics to do that. But talking about a multimodal artifact which is so multimodally complex, I would always say you also need to include the other resources.
Thank you for the talk. When you talk about multimodal literacy, I ask myself, can we derive support measures from media literacy, for example, or for teaching students how to watch movies, or do we have to create new support measures
I think we can derive some things. So if you compare how reading on an e-reader is done and mirroring old processes of reading a material book, right? There are similar patterns, but for many other media that kids often meet earlier than reading a book, we need to find out what the patterns are. So Gunter Grass and colleagues have early argued that kids are able to play video games without reading the menu and just analyzing and identifying, hey, I need to click on this. And my kids are the best proof that this is possible. Sometimes they ask me what is set there so that they really get the idea, but they usually play without my help. So yes, one can, but one might miss out things that are important early on already. And the idea of developing these multiliteracies or meta-languages, pedagogies of multiliteracies that came up in the 1990s is exactly looking at this question. What bring the media in that needs to be taken up? Yeah.
I have a question on the production especially, because I think it's really important for the multimodal analysis as well. Like, I mean, you've kind of like tried also to trace this importance of understanding what is TikTok specific and what's not. So, I mean, of course, teachers and all of that are platform specific, but I think also it's so difficult to understand because people can also use CapCut, which is used a lot, so it's not even on TikTok, but and it appears as TikTok specific. So, do you have you thought about that also, how to include this part of production?
Yeah, a multimodal analysis always looks at the product because we often do not have access to the production level, but that's, I think, a next step to see how people use these tools. And many of these tools are actually starting with a lot of, let's say, film literacy knowledge already, because how do you know that a crosscut works like this? Or how do you know that an over-the-shoulder shot might have a particular function? The platform is not teaching you this, right? It's either you know that from watching films or watching TikToks, or someone has actually taught you that, but this is not happening currently in schools, I think. So it's a bit learning by doing, I would say, without having a clear guidance for this. Yeah.
Yes, so if you're interested in doing a production analysis, I will be happy to make a screen recording of my
Yes.
production.
Yeah, it would be great.
And also to combine this with Rodney's talk, when I'm doing lip sync, of course, I'm talking loudly along with the sound, because to align it perfectly with the sound, I need to speak by myself. Yes. And this you learn only when you do
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Jan. I have to moderate myself. Okay, so I'm Simon Meyer-Vieracker and I'm giving a talk. Okay, and I'm giving a talk on stitches as metapragmatic devices and the use for science communication. So like other social media platforms, TikTok offers a broad variety for interactive features. We have the comment sections, but TikTok also offers opportunities for interaction on the video level. The core feature of lip sync, sound reuse for lip sync, duets, and the main topic of my talk, stitches. All these functions allow users to react to other videos and make something out of them, making TikTok one more example for the well-known participatory culture of social media with its multimodal recontextualization practices. And like other forms of digital quoting, like we know it from Twitter or Threads, but expanding it to the multimodal level, stitches allow creators to embed others' content into their own videos and to both reply to and comment on it. And the app's integrated video production software makes it very, very easy for creators to build up on others' content. The recurrent, there are recurrent forms and functions of stitches, what people do with stitches. We have debunking of disinformation and counter-speech when we face toxic content. The German ones of you maybe know Tara Luise Witwer with her format TikToxic. This is what I'm thinking about. But also science communication is making use of stitches, and this is what I want to talk about today. So I want to discuss these instances of stitches and used for science communication, and in line with the topic of our conference, I will give a special focus on science communication in linguistics. Science communication in linguistics, which as linguistics as a whole, is a way of communicating about language. And I want to show how stitches can be described as a metapragmatic device that foregrounds language and language use on TikTok in culturally responsive ways. So my structure is very straightforward: research overview, data method, results, and conclusion. So I start with a research overview. Long before TikTok, YouTube had this feature of video responses. I don't know if you remember. So people could upload videos as a response to other videos, which were then shown in the comments section. This feature did not survive too long. It disappeared about 2008 or something. But in a couple of works, Elisabetta Adami has analyzed forms of coherence or incoherence in video response on YouTube. And she uses the conceptual framework of social semiotics, and I find this very instructive also for the study of TikTok stitches. So Adami starts from Gunter Kress' idea that communication is always a response by one participant to a prompt by other participants in social events. Kress was not talking about stitches, but this works perfectly for stitches. And in this prompt response thing, the prompt sets the ground for the interpretation as expressed in the response. So we have this interactional view. So the prompt as interpreted by the receiving person may contain various elements which can be referred to or related to by the response. And then Adami develops this typology of relatedness, as she calls it, between the prompting video and the response. It must be conceived as a continuum with a descending degree of relatedness. So we have adjacency pairs in the true sense of the term, and then it goes to coherent relatedness without cohesion, down to no clues of relatedness. And the cohesive ties that knit together prompt and response include linguistic but also multimodal features like, for example, language, facial expression, gesture, camera perspective, color scheme, and so on. I think Janina could join in here. In sum, Adami describes video responses as conscious, acknowledged, and pursued reinterpretation and a loose form of individualized participation in terms of a transformative response to a prompt. And this transformativeness I find very promising also for the study of TikTok stitches. We may move to a more discourse analytical perspective of Jan Blommert, who is talking about recontextualization, which adds a new meta-discursive context to a text. So we have always some kind of meta perspective coming in. And Daniel Furceller, in a study which will come out in 2 weeks or so, he develops this typology of tasks fulfilled by stitches. So what people can do by stitching other videos. And we have continuing a narrative, extending an argument, conveying knowledge by giving additional information, and commenting on events. And of course, this one is the most important thing for science communication. So in the following, I will look at science communication stitches as prompt response pairs, like Adami does, and I will analyze the different types of relatedness and ask which tasks stitches may fulfill in the context of science communication. I have a very, very, very small corpus of 18 stitches. I had also the plan to talk about video replies, but I have to skip this for time reasons. And I collected these stitches through the search terms like stitch science, Wissenschaft, linguistics, and so on. And I also scrolled through famous accounts like Klima Tübingen or Linguistik studieren to find some more data. And I did some very rough transcripts and I tried to annotate prompt and response types and markers of cohesion, mostly linguistic, but also some multimodal markers of cohesion. Okay, so my results. I found 4 patterns roughly, and the first pattern can be observed is an Orbit question-answer sequence, an adjacency pair in the true sense of the term. People often ask questions on TikTok, which should not be misunderstood as a true information request. I mean, asking questions on TikTok is not very efficient as compared to Googling or something, but people do it anyway. And I want to show you some examples.
How come we don't pronounce the word work like fork? Why don't we say we're going to work? Fork, cork, dork, work.
Okay. I always show only the beginning of the answer.
Or can somebody explain to me why bad words are bad words? Like, what's the criteria that makes a curse word different from like all the other words?
I hate people that ask questions like these.
Okay.
How come we don't pronounce the word?
How ibuprofen nowhere pain?
How ibuprofen nowhere pain? Ibuprofen have secret. Ibuprofen not nowhere pain. Ibuprofen everywhere. Whole body. Ibuprofen inhibit COX. No pain. Only notice where pain sides.
Okay, this was not from linguistics, but I still wanted to show. And okay. Okay, although these questions are not true information requests, creators still take the chance of answering these questions from a scientific perspective. But I think we have a strong performative character, as the questions are performative and not true questions. Also, the answers have this strong performative character. They answer often in humorous ways. For example, here he gives parallel examples, not to explain, but to demonstrate the linguistic phenomenon that he's talking about. And also in this example, I hate people answering questions like these. After this, he tries to explain the inherent negative semantics of hate. And this is his way to explain why bad words are bad words. And here in this example, we have this grammatically deficient sentence, which is stylistically mirrored in the answer. Okay? So because of this strong performative aspects, I was reminded of the work of Baumann-Briggs, who defined performance as a specially marked, artful way of speaking that puts the act of speaking on display. So this is a strong metapragmatic impulse which comes in here through the performative way of speaking in the answers. Okay, so we have other kind of questions which are also not questions, but something more like pre-announcement, as conversation analysis would call it.
Have you guys ever heard of the theory on how people who only speak English have a less developed brain?
No, I have not, because everybody's brain is equally developed. No one has an underdeveloped brain unless they're a child.
Okay, so ever heard of the theory is not expected to get answered, but it's a pre-announcement. Okay, but still, Yuval, the creator Yuval, still takes the chance to give a response, which is some kind of dispreferred behavior in this very situation. this preferred behavior, which then creates friction and also attention. We have another example. Jan might remember of his own example. Can we talk about how bad it is to be gaslighted by medical professionals? And then he answers, we definitely can and we should. But before that, let's move on to a less important topic first. So this is also some kind of dispreferred behavior when answering this question, can we talk about, and so on. Okay, so we have, let me see. So we have this, and these answers, they are linguistically cohesive, but I want to call them pragmatically incoherent, since they have this dispreferred character in that situation. We have another pattern in my sample, which are controversies, which implicitly raise questions, which are then taken up and commented on in the responses. Let me show you an example.
The iconic video game character Mario.
Oh, you mean Mario? I mean, you can pronounce it both ways, but he says Mario, so I feel like...
That's right, Mario.
I think this video is really interesting, because obviously the perspective here is that this is an American who doesn't understand why British people won't pronounce the A's in certain people's names the same way that they pronounce them.
Okay, so here the creator takes a meta perspective from the outside and explains the underlying reasons for the controversy in the prompt video. So it's not so much about telling who is right, if Mario is pronounced Mario, but he explains why there is a disagreement at all. And while this interruption is somewhat incoherent, it is still cohesively tied through the discourse dative pronoun this video. But this I find very interesting because this video is referring to the video as a video. So he's not referring so much to the controversy, but to the video which he is watching, like all the other people are doing as well. He's referring to not to the intradiegetic level, but reflexively referring to the situation of video consumption on TikTok, which the creator shares with any other TikTok user, including his recipients. And a similar pattern can be found in cases where the prompt video stages some kind of disagreement on the intrapersonal level. You are analyzed. So when people are unsure which linguistic variant is the right one, again, we can doubt if this creator is really unsure which is the right variant or if it's some kind of performance, but we find this very often. And here the response says, hear me out, I need to expand a little on that, whereby he shows attention for the awareness for the attention structures of TikTok, where we will scroll to the next video after 5 seconds. So we need this pre-announcement. I will come to this later. Okay, so all patterns discussed so far have in common that some kind of explicit or implicit metalinguistic question in the prompt video is responded to, but this is not always the case. Another pattern similar to the well-known debunking debunking use of stitches is the challenge of metalinguistic claims. Let me show what I mean with this.
Most of you are using the word aesthetic incorrectly.
You can't just say that it looks aesthetic. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, you guys, I think you know what this means. Welcome back for part 6 of my series. Your language pet peeve is linguistically unfounded and you should get a hobby.
Okay, so notably and untypically, the creator here is addressing the stitched persons when he says you guys, and you know what this means. But then after this, the video is framed, you can see it here, no, you can see it here, sorry. It is then framed as a part of a series, as part 6 of a series, which opens up another type of intertextual relatedness. And consequently, after that, the creator then switches to a third-person perspective when he's talking about that these guys are mistakenly thinking that what was it? about the meaning of, about the use of the word aesthetic. Okay. So the creator switches to a meta-pragmatic level and focuses on language ideological foundations of what is going on in the prompt videos. Another example is this by Yuval, who stitches a video on the widespread mistake on accident by asking, what does this mean? Seriously, what exactly are we saying when we say the phrase on accident is a mistake? So again, Yuval does not only reject the claim itself, but focuses on the meta-pragmatic judgment of calling something a mistake, and this is put to the fore. So what this, I guess a switch on a meta-pragmatic level. What this pattern has in common with the group of patterns with meta-linguistic questions is that the response takes up and elaborates a meta-linguistic problem, a point where language is becoming an issue in ongoing communication. That is, there is a meta-pragmatic point of reference in the prompt video itself. But again, this has not to be the case. Because I found another pattern which I want to call initiation and completion. And I want to show you two wonderful examples.
Digga, wenn ihr mal einen schlechten Tag habt, dann denkt daran,
dass das Wort Digga existiert.
Okay, once again, because it was so short.
Digga, wenn ihr mal einen schlechten Tag habt, dann denkt daran,
dass das Wort Digga existiert.
Es ist kalt geworden, mir geht's nicht so gut. Sterben tue ich nicht. Mit etwas Wissen über Linguistik. Heute tun wir die Phrasen. Let's go.
Okay, so here we find the cut in the middle of the sentence. The stitches interrupt the prompt videos in the middle of the sentence and completes them in such a way that the linguistic form itself becomes the topic. So we find here a most drastic topical shift, and a high grade of incoherence, but which is combined with almost seamless linguistic cohesion. And this I find very interesting. So complete incoherence, but a maximum of cohesion. Not only on the linguistic level, but also through camera perspective, clothing, a kind of zip merging cutting technique, Reißverschlussprinzip, and so on. So the incoherence is mitigated through a very high degree of cohesion, which literally draws the recipients into the video. So to conclude my analysis, we can distinguish between 4 different main patterns of prompt-response pairs in linguistic science communication stitches. Q&A sequences on language, metalinguistic issues and their commentaries, metapragmatic claims and their challenges, and lastly, initiations and completions. In the first 3 patterns, the metapragmatic point of reference is inside the prompt videos. In the 4th pattern, the metapragmatic breaking up of the flow of speech comes only with the response. I've shown that prompt and responsive are cohesively tied together through proforms, discourse stakes, elliptic forms, and so on, but also multimodal alignments. But contrary to cohesion, there are sometimes drastic topical shifts when switching to a metapragmatic or even meta-ideological level. It seems as if the more coherent a response is with regard to the topic, the more cohesive it has to be. The more incoherent a response is, the more cohesive it has to be in order not to lose the audience. I try to visualize it like this. And this was interesting to me to find this in the data. So the language issues that linguistic creators may address through stitches include a broad variety of phenomena, phonology, morphology, language change, semantic categories, and so on. And of course, the stitch people don't call it like this because they don't have the terminology for calling like this. But they deal with everyday problems and riddles that they are facing in their everyday life. And as trained linguists, the responding creators do not only give an answer to the questions raised in the prompt videos, but take a meta perspective on why these things are an issue in the first place. And this is what I mean with stitches as metapragmatic devices, since they are always accompanied by a change of level up to meta-ideological considerations. And so in this way, and this is why in my view, TikTok stitches are so well suited for linguistic science communication. Stitches as more or less surprising cuts afford this switch to a meta level where then linguists can jump in and do their job. But this job remains in the discourse universe of TikTok, because they're using the same visual means and the same mimetic means as the stitched creators. They all belong to the community of producers. You might remember this term of Alex Bruns, I guess. As I've shown, the situation of video consumption, which creators share with their audience, is often reflected in the videos by deictic reference, but also by the selfie aesthetics of people, and they're holding their phone. So they're watching videos on their phone, and then immediately they begin to produce videos on the same device. So stitches are always some kind of reaction videos, and they creators stage themselves as watching and reacting to a video on the smartphone. And I want to give you an analogy from the history of our discipline. I don't know if you ever read Karl Bühler in the original, Sprachtheorie, because Bühler is an author who wrote his book Sprachtheorie by reading other books, as a reader of other books, and he always makes reference to the very act of reading while he's writing. And so he's referring to the act of reading when writing about language, and thus he aligns with other readers who have the same books on their table. And I think this strategy is in some way remediated in an audiovisual setting on TikTok. TikTok creators refer to the act of watching when making videos and thus align with their audience. And all this, I think, helps to present linguistics as dealing with, but also being part of social life in the digital age. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk. Are there any questions? We have time for some questions. Sophie Free, yes?
So you talked a lot about how the creator of the stitches for specific pragmatic function in answering the videos they stitch, and what kind of pragmatic function have these videos where they say the stitches and come in for the viewers? So how is this form of video communication to the
Okay. If I understand you right, you're asking what's the pragmatic function from an audience perspective.
Yes, is it to keep the motivation to keep watching, or what is? Yeah.
Okay, so and my argument was that when science communicators are answering the questions they find on TikTok, they are not giving only answers to these questions, but they combine this with a change of level to a more meta-pragmatic or even meta-ideological level, to explain that linguistics is not so much about telling who's right and who's wrong, but to explain that we have that linguists have this more meta perspective, which is not so much prescriptive but more analytical and so on. And I think that hopefully this will also be understood by the viewers. Hopefully. Willst du
Thank you, Simona. I really enjoyed this. And I haven't read Karl Bühler in the original, I'm afraid, but I will try to translation, I like this idea of this sort of metapragmatic level, and I was thinking about these as a kind of pedagogical genre, as an instructional genre, and what makes them so compelling. I think the reason my students, for example, would really like these videos and learn a lot from these videos is that along with that metapragmatic level, there is also this kind of very interesting interactional work going on, right? Often involving even the linguist proving that this questioner is really stupid or denigrating them in some way or interacting in various other ways. And I thought about how that actually remediates quite a lot of other genres in older media. I thought, for example, of advice columns and advice columns in newspapers. I mean, many of us maybe have never even read advice columns in newspapers, but when I was a child, one of the things about these advice columns was how clever the advice givers were at making fun of the questioners, right? Of kind of, taking the questioners down. So you also find that in radio call-in programs, right? Where people call in and there is this kind of interesting kind of Freudian triangle where the caller is kind of mocked, the listener is the audience, right? Is this kind of wise who gets to take the position of the smart, in this case, the smart linguist rather than the dumb questioner. So I thought that kind of interpersonal aspect of it was quite interesting, and I wonder if you have any thoughts about that kind of aspect.
Yeah. So I gave this one hint about the address forms. Where the creator at first addresses the stitch creators, and then it switches to a broader audience. I think we should analyze these forms of address in more detail, which are very most interesting to me, because as I said, asking questions on TikTok is in a way stupid, because I should Google if I want to know. I should Google if I want to know why bad words are bad words. But if I put this on TikTok, I open it to a broad audience, to a worldwide audience, and then to see how other people play along with me this game of performing on a stage. This is interesting. Yeah. And this is also valuable for science communication when we're joining in this game.
Okay, first Janina. And my question is a bit connected to this. How much of this is similar to memes, for which all this talk about incoherence is I think a bit, I'm not a meme specialist, but there is this whole idea of memes work with this incoherence, and while memes might not have the question in the artifact itself, they have this in the context, and then the meme is a response to this. So yeah, my question is about this. Do you see parallels or similar strategies, not in the material, but in this metapragmatic way of addressing a particular content?
I have to think about this because we have lip syncs. We have lip syncs which are more close to memes in the original sense of the term. And if I can describe stitches as some kind of mimetic content, I don't know. This metapragmatic thing, of course, and this is why I quoted Blommert, this meta-discursive context, which I find interesting.
But you would not define a stitch as some sort of meme?
No, I would not.
Okay.
Because every stitch is some kind of unique, and we don't have this serial character. Of course, we have some kind of recurrent forms and formats. I was talking about patterns, but I would not define them as memes.
More on the interpretative side, I reckon one way to look at this call and response stimulus and response structure is in terms of politeness and in terms of the degrees of face saving versus that the teacher or the expert performs towards the actor who serves as an impulse, as a stimulus. And so some of the cases, and also some of your work online is, so it could be considered impolite, face-threatening, because, so you know, the expert, there's a stitch that presents a lay view on language, and then the expert says, oh, right, we're going to deconstruct this, or I'm going to tell you how it is. Or in the case of the gentleman, the colleagues over there example, so this was an interruption, right? So it is construed as an interruption. So I was wondering, under the lens of politeness, how these practices construe the teacher persona or the expert persona as a gentle teacher as opposed to an offensive teacher of or expert in terms of language. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think he's construed as offensive, and people love it. Because it satisfies some kind of voyeurist attitude. So a typical reaction is schlafen gelegt in German.
Put him to bed.
Yeah.
Put him to sleep.
You put him to sleep. And
so it has to be different than the persona construed in the classroom, right?
Yes.
In that sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Of course.
All right.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you very much again.
Freien Slot für den Presenter.
Sekunde. Eben schauen, ob das jetzt. Sorry. Geht's?
Okay.
Sorry.
Ja, macht nichts. Wenn es nicht geht, dann geht es eben nicht. Dann muss ich dann hier drauf gehen. Okay. Aber das geht, oder? Damit kann ich sagen. Okay.
Könntest du einmal das L machen? Für die Kamera?
So?
Genau.
Okay.
Okay, we are now happy to introduce Yannis Anthrotsopoulos with his talk on AlgoSpeak, Visual Disguise and Register Formation on German TikTok. You have the word.
So thank you, and also a thank you on the part of Lena Schröder, who cannot be here unfortunately for health reasons today. Compared to the previous talks, what we have to offer is disappointingly mono-modal. So it's not about multimodality. We did a case study on just one tiny aspect of language use on TikTok, and language use in written language, not even spoken language, which is known as AlgoSpeak. And so maybe this is a complement to other perspectives on TikTok. Maybe it's a sort of a bet or an experiment to see whether an analysis, a linguistic analysis or take on TikTok is possible without doing multimodal analysis. Not that I don't like it, I'm a big fan of multimodal analysis myself, but this is not about multimodality. So AlgoSpeak as a term came up or hit the news at about 2022 in media reports and some very few academic papers alike. This could be one of the first American English publications on the topic, which does what a good media piece does on something like that. So there's a definition of AlgoSpeak. There is a sort of a motivation, an explanation of the pragmatic motivation. People change their language, or AlgoSpeak changes the language as people create a new vocabulary to avoid angering the almighty algorithm. And this paper, this report also cites some academic work that you will see in a couple of slides later on, and explains the situation. The literature review is done really fast in this case, because there's just a few, very, very few papers on my list about AlgoSpeak. A couple of papers come from Klug, Stein, and Jureczko, who work at Carnegie Mellon, and what they did is semi-structured interviews with TikTok content creators. So they didn't do a linguistic analysis, they talked to people whose accounts include bits and pieces of AlgoSpeak. And so what they found out is that what they document is the awareness of content creators of twisting the linguistic form in order to avoid algorithmic censorship or algorithmic content moderation, and also on the part of some of the informants to do justice to unjust moderation practices by TikTok. So the idea that is reinforced here through the interviews is that some of these algorithmic moderation practices are undeserved and irrational, so they discriminate, or they minorities or sexual minorities or other minorities who try to do emancipatory publications about their own topics, and so by using AlgoSpeak try to ensure and achieve adequate freedom of speech and equality on TikTok. So there's a sort of a political or activist perspective on it. These scholars also describe in the sample of AlgoSpeak cases that they have 3 basic techniques of censorship avoidance, which we also find in German data. One is semantic, replacing items by semantically similar items. Often these are euphemisms or other forms of semantic play, like unalive, in order to disguise the word dead, which is banned or was banned in English. Pictorial, like the proverbial eggplant emoji or the corn emoji to talk about porn or things like that. And graphic, which is the main topic in our take, and all the arrows here show how prevalent the graphic modification of items, so respellings, are in these examples of AlgoSpeak. Another study which I discovered later on in the process is by Calhoun and Fawcett, who looked at data. So they did a product and linguistic analysis and discourse analysis based on more than 200 TikTok videos from 21 and 22, a bit earlier in the day, and in fact they are cited by the Los Angeles Times, I think the piece I showed you in the beginning. They have a more elaborate list of techniques of self-censorship. The first one is the one we focused on in the study, where the non-letters replace letters, and many of the items they have here are instances of respelling that create a sort of phonological neighbor to the target item, so to the item that should be disguised in order to avoid banning, like drugs for drugs, or Nazi for Nazi, or woke meat for smoke weed. So, and in some cases you have the semantic replacement by an item that is phonologically unrelated to the target item. These 2 scholars also make the interesting observation, by looking at their data, that AlgoSpeak has a sort of a dual function. At the first level, it serves to disguise videos or topics in videos from algorithmic censorship, but it also goes beyond that to act as a playful resource as participation, they say, in a platform trend and as a means to index socio-political alignment. So it's not just disguising your language in order to talk about sensitive topics, it's also about aligning with others. This is their findings, and we look how that works with German data. Meanwhile, there has been a couple of media reports, or a few media reports, again in 22-23, about AlgoSpeak on German TikTok, basically reiterating the trope from the American media, and these studies quote the one I showed you before, and there are examples that they refer to, or that initially my students made me aware of at the end of 23, beginning of 24, about AlgoSpeak. So I'm not going to play any videos for reasons of time, but how this works is that you have AlgoSpeak items, like the Orgasmus here, borderline, or Drogen. So you have single items within longer phrases where one or more letters have been replaced, and these appear as text overlays both in the caption and usually also in the running video, and you often have a couple of them or several of these, and in some cases these are aligned to the spoken word in the video. In other cases they're not aligned. So this lady here does not talk at all. You have music, and she points to the linguistic items that are shown in text overlays about the symptoms or the expressions of borderline syndrome. Okay, and many of these are disguised by AlgoSpeak techniques. In other cases, there is an alignment, and in the cases of alignment, sometimes the spoken word is self-censored, censored as well. So they don't say orgasmus, they say orgasms or something like that, in order to disguise also the spoken form of the language. And also, there is an awareness that certain words are censored on German TikToks or German words, and also if you do the test yourself, and type in words either on the mobile phone or on the browser, such as to kill yourself or steroids or national Nazis or something like that, then you land on screens like that, which, depending on the semantics of the word, show messages like you're not alone, or get the facts, or inform yourself, or something like that. So, our research questions are of a very peculiar kind. So my own focus, and also on the basis of my own interest in research, is on just one AlgoSpeak technique, which is respelling. So I don't consider the semantic alternations or the emoji at all, but I'm just interested in the cases where words are modified by symbols, numerals, or whatever else, without indexing some difference in spoken pronunciation. I'm interested in this kind of respelling, which in the German tradition goes under graphostylistic variation. So this is a term and a classification that goes back decades, and now sort of is very well applicable to what happens on TikTok, and which is opposed to phonostylistic variation. So the point in graphostylistic variation is not to index spoken language features in writing, but to distort the shape of writing without any relation, with a relation to orthography, but not a relation to spoken language. Another interesting theoretical framing is the notion of heterographia or heterography, which of course is dubbed or is developed from heteroglossia, the intentional, artful crafting of difference in written language form. And as a case of heterographia, AlgoSpeak presupposes an awareness of the orthographic form, an awareness of language ideologies that sort of construe the AlgoSpeak form as a deviance, and also skills, the skills to create and appreciate different sort of respelling. So the question here is, how systematic are respellings, and what are the limits of variation? So how is it possible to distort words or to disguise words? The other level that is interesting is the register or register formation. So the term AlgoSpeak itself construes these phenomena as a register. So there is a register in the sense that certain semiotic forms are associated with a model of a cultural activity, and in this case the practice of respelling to avoid the automated censorship of posting. So this is the awareness, this is in register, and the idea that those who want to avoid their videos being taken down use a certain set of techniques of semantic or graphic or pictorial kind. Okay? Within this register, there is a part of that is the idea that there is a dual level of adressivity. So in German we would say this is mehrfach adressiert, so there's a multiple adressivity. So one addressee of the algospeaked forms is the algorithm, so the system of content moderation, which is to be tricked out. And the other layer of adressivity is people, those who participate in TikTok, in the circulation of TikTok discourse, including journalists and researchers. So the question here is much more explorative. So it's about the use, it's about the circulation, it's also about the spread from a sociolinguistic perspective. Is there any evidence of algospeak having spread through German TikTok in the course of these 2 or 3 years? So what we did, and this is where Lena Schroeder did the data collection and the coding in collaboration with me, in a snowball process, we compiled 152 postings from 88 accounts from late 2020 to early 24, and these were all postings that included one or more instances of algospeak. We did a manual annotation in terms of what are the words what are the target words, which graphemes have been replaced, and tried to devise categories of graphemic replacement and things like that. What are the topics to a topical analysis? And also did some back and forth between the datasheet and the platform, which is necessary for the second research question in order to understand who uses that and what are the dynamics of use and circulation. So to start with semantic fields, the large majority of algospeak tokens fall into the categories that are already reported in research and in media pieces. So there are no big surprises there. We have a lot of items that come in videos which talk about different forms of sexual emancipation, I would say. It's not just about sexual hygiene, it's about making public the interests and the concerns of sexual minorities, of queer people, of LGBTQ people, and talking about these things in public and in a fierce way. There's also videos on mental health and self-harm, talking about eating disorders and anorexia and things like that, and these are clearly words that are banned on TikTok. There are videos on substances, different kinds of substances, and also videos of political extremism. And across all these groups, several items are indeed banned by TikTok algorithms in German, but not all of them. And to this point, I return below. And in addition, we find in this material a few colloquial words that do not fall into these semantic fields, but they might be everyday obscenity, like things like this and this, okay? So, which are also algo-speaked without a necessity of doing so, because these things are not banned on TikTok. We did a classification of the different forms, and here we need 3 categories. We have algospeak tokens, and these are 376, and then we have algospeak types, which are less, and so that means that certain algospeak forms are repeated more than once, okay? So there is some repetition, for example, of Nazi with the @ sign, so this is found more than once. And the lexical types are only 197. So that means that a lot of lexical types are algospeaked in more than one ways. And as the table shows, so we have some, the hits here are words like sexual, Nazi, sex, cannabis, pornos, eating disorder, misuse, right extreme drugs, and self-harm and things like that, and so which have 6 or 5 or 4 different algospeak types. Okay, so there's a lot of creativity there. There's no, in sociolinguistic terms, you would say there's a lot of diffusion. There is not focusing on one single algospeak type, but people basically do as they please. They look at the others, what the others do, but they try to be creative and also original in disguising, okay? And we do find sometimes these words fall into phrases or syntagmas with 2 or 3 algospeak items, but this is rather rare overall. So in most cases you have one phrase or one clause within a text overlay, and 1 or 2 items in there is algospeak, and the others are in the usual orthography, and we'll come back to this point as well. We tried to classify the letter substitution techniques, asking basically about semiotic motivation. So what motivates the different ways of substituting letters for other characters? And the large majority of items are iconic substitutions. So these are respellings that contain one or more visually similar characters without any, regardless of the phonetic value, if any, of that character. So you have the 3 for E, the euro sign for E, the @ sign for A, the 0 for O. Some of these are known from lead speak and other techniques of disguise and graphic distortion. So you have a lot of that. There are a few cases of placeholder substitution. So you have the star and you have the letter X. And these again have intertextual, you can say, predecessors in things that you see in American newspapers, especially, or in American soap operas where you have, you can say fuck on American TV, I think. So you see the stars and things like that. You can't even read it. So there are some of these, and there are very few phonologically motivated, especially on the word sex in this case, which is, so it's not just algo-speaked by means of the currency side, but you also have replacements of letters that allude to different ways to pronounce the word, maybe in different regional varieties or colloquial registers of German. There is even more detail, so we did a lot of microanalysis on that, looking at which words are substituted in which ways. And so interestingly, we found that people substitute vowels much more common often than consonants, which I think goes back to the main idea that consonants are much more vital and important in visually recognizing a word than are vowels. And also there's a very large variety of replacing characters, the characters that are replaced instead of the characters of the target. So this is really a long tail situation where you have some replacement characters that are very often, and so, but some people take, the Scandinavian O, or some people take letter emojis, and some people use an O with an accent or an S with an accent grave or with a hatchek or things like that. So basically you can imagine people going through the Unicode set and then selecting different letters and characters on the condition that they're visually similar to the ones in the target word. And so I can spare you that. So we did a distribution analysis of all the vowels. So these are the vowels that are distributed, and these are the variants for each with their the occurrences. And so you see there's less vowels, but with more occurrences, and more consonant, but with less occurrences, except of S. Okay, so two things we can take from that are also interesting about in terms of register formation is creating algospeak forms can make a lot of semiotic effort also, so people take a lot of effort in order to create algospeak forms, and as we see, sometimes without a technical necessity to do so. And also algospeak is less chaotic than it seems. So you have this wide range of variants, but basically if you have a clause in the textual overlay, so there's 1 or 2 words within that overlay that are algospeaked, and within a word there are only 1 or 2 or a maximum of 3 of letters that are algospeaked. And more importantly, the correspondences are stable. So the @ sign is always an A. It's never an O or an E. So you have stable correspondences. And so while people twist and bend their spellings, they do it in a way that is also perceivable and intelligible to the second layer of addressivity, to the humans who participate in TikTok discourse. Now, in terms of register formation, maybe I should say register transformation. We looked at where algospeak items appear, and in most cases they appear either in overlays within a video or in the preview, and sometimes in the video, in the preview, and in the caption, but very seldomly only in the preview or only the caption. So it's a sort of an implication structure, right? They're mainly in the videos or in the videos and the previews, more rarely in the captions, and very rarely in the comment sections. So algospeak is not a resource for comment interaction, it's a resource for display, okay? That's one conclusion here. The second conclusion is that very often German algospeak users, content creators, overshoot the target. And it's really, because we haven't done any interviews, it's really puzzling why this happens. So these are words that are censored, and Rodney and others who don't speak German, you can recognize many of them, like anorexia, borderline, and cannabis, and things like that. and some are racist terms and things like that. So these are really indeed censored, and they need to be algospeaked, disguised, in order for the videos not to be taken down. Words like drugs and sex and porno and queer have been censored in the past, but are not anymore. And words like alcohol, anal sex, anti-Semitic, and others have never been censored. And yet, when you look at videos who use algospeak, all these different things come together. So here you have a sort of a political influencer, Nina Erklärt Politik, and she explains the different types of emojis that right extreme and neo-Nazis use. And so she algospeaks the words Rechtsextreme with a 3, and National Socialism with 2 items that are 2 characters, anti-Semitic in one way here and in another way here, so two different ways of to disguise within one video. And some of these items, a few of these items are censored. It's actually only Nazi that is censored, and the others are not censored. Okay. So it's really unclear whether Nina and others think that more items are censored than they indeed are, or whether they don't care and they purposefully expand the technique to mark sensitive topics or to contextualize sensitive topics. Another 2 points, and I'm done. It's very difficult to find out how this practice has spread, because it's impossible to quantify it. I've been trying to figure out a way to find out, and as a more qualitative person, and it's impossible to quantify it at large. The only way that seems feasible to me is to go down to a profile level and identify profiles or accounts who have been using algospeak in the past and are still using it systematically, as opposed to those who are using it only sporadically. So you have steady users and occasional users, and also to see whether steady users go further back in the past than occasional users. So this is my idea of figuring out how that works, and the hypothesis here is that algospeak I would hypothesize to spread from a few activist accounts, those engaged in emancipatory communication on TikTok, to accounts of media organizations or other corporations who basically jump on the bandwagon and follow the trend. And what we indeed find is, so if you take just this is one of the accounts who have been doing sexual emancipation information for many years. If you go to the most popular videos, sorted by the TikTok algorithm. So you have here, this is algorithm vibrator and sex and intime rasur, okay? And also the oldest videos, they also have the orgasm and the bumsen and sex. So algospeaked items are there in association with the topics, and you find a bit of algospeak in more recent videos, but not so systematically anymore. So one possibility is that those who started it are abandoning it now, because, I mean, it takes, the trend fades out at some point. And what happened in 23-24 is that we found algospeak items. So this is DRK. If you live in Germany, you know the DRK. This is a health insurance, public health insurance organization, and they have an account where they inform about what happens if you can get a hard-on or things like that. And so they use algospeak in 24, but not back in 2020, 21, when talking about the same things. And also, this is a very interesting one, the 20-minute Mini-Geschichte, which is a Swiss one. This is really popular media. This is a tabloid on TikTok. And they use algospeak here and here when it comes to harassment. So the word harassment is algospeak, and the word sexual is algospeak. So they get to know it and they use it now and then. 2 slides and I'm done. Conclusions from register analysis. So algospeak respellings are a resource for display rather than interaction. A lot of algospeak times do not match censored words on TikTok, so people overshoot the target if we assume the target is to disguise. And early and recurrent use by accounts that focus on sensitive topics is contrasted empirically to later and occasional use by general interest media organizations, from which I would assume that there have been early adopters and late adopters in the German TikTok sphere or world. So It's still, I mean, I think you need to talk to people to figure out what happens there. It could be that people think that these items are censored. It could be that based on how they think the TikTok algorithm works. It could be that people willingly expand the range of items that are algo-speaked to the extent they fall into sensitive topic areas or even beyond these topic areas. One thing that plays a role here, I think, is what Tuli and Tuli have described about how TikTok as a whole is based on memeticity and on creating memetic publics. And I think Rodney showed this very well. The imitation that is afforded by stitches and lip sync and all the other options that TikTok offers. So in conclusion, I would agree with Calhoun and Fawcett, who say that there's an expansion from disguise to community creating purposes and also to contextualization purposes. In my wording, I would say that AlgoSpeak is re-indexicalized or re-functionalized as a contextualization cue. It is the register itself that construes a topic as sensitive or as extreme or as something censorship worthy. And by extension, by algo-speaking, you construe your topic as sensitive, and you construe yourself as a discourse actor who dares speak about sensitive topics. And this is certainly not part of the original idea that you do it for the algorithm, okay? And so in this process, the second layer of addressivity to human participants overshadows the first layer of addressivity if we assume that this distinction at the very first. And concluding, you could also think about how this mutual alignment of AlgoSpeak users to all other AlgoSpeak users gives rise to something that, such as a light community, a term coined by Blomat and Varis, where they don't mean a stable online community, but something fleeting and elusive, so that people taking notice of what other people do, afforded by the algorithmic connections between videos. So you can search up an AlgoSpeak item, and then you can see who uses that AlgoSpeak item. And so these communities are tight, glued together by knowledge of the rules of the game, and also by an appreciation of how others do these semiotic transformations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Janis. We still have some time for discussion. John.
Right, that was so good. That was such a fantastic paper. And it's also done verbally as well. So I've been noticing TikTok, this kind of strange language that's being developed because people are so afraid of being banned or shadow banned. So when that health insurance executive was killed in New York, do you know about that? So and it was a big thing on TikTok, but people kept saying he was unalived. He was unalived. And I'm like, what is this unalived? That's really strange.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I go, that's because if you say killed, you're gonna be banned on TikTok. But that's obviously not true, because there were, for example, stitches of news reports who say a health executive was killed in New York City. So I mean, obviously that's not true, but there is this kind of folk algorithmics that comes up where people sort of have to guess. And I think the point that you made was also a big part of it, that it just became more fun to say unalived, more interesting than to say killed. But I mean, I wonder what you think about this kind of enregisterment of a paranoid stance towards the algorithm on TikTok. So, because it's not just like censored or not censored. For TikTok users, there's this whole kind of range of what could happen to you, from being banned, being kicked off the platform, having your account canceled, to being shadow banned, to your videos just not getting any traction for some reason, right? And so this has kind of created, I think, among users this kind of paranoia almost. Like, I'm not quite sure what to say. What do you think about that?
Well, we don't know what happens exactly in the algorithmic content moderation. I think that's where the problem, or there's also in the literature, it's described as a black box. So we know that, I mean, there is a list of items, and you can empirically see this, but I don't know whether the use of these words will get you banned or just downplayed in the relevance, so shadow banned. I don't know. So ultimately, it goes down to what people think that will happen to them. Also, maybe some people think that spoken language is also automatically moderated. I thought it's only written language that goes through this scanning. I don't know. I guess there might be. I would guess there are different states of consciousness in that sense for different groups of people. But what unites them, it's basically the resources that they use. So the fact that they use. There's a certain set of alternatives or substitutes for certain target words, and there's a bit of overspillage so that these semantic areas are extended. And I even think it goes on. And I recently, just by preparing this talk, I bumped onto a sort of a migrant political activist who is using graph character alternatives I've never seen before. So people creatively take it further and create even more graphic variation, even for items that are completely inconspicuous, like elections or something like that. So it is becoming more of a recontextualization cue, but this is the German perspective where perhaps regulations are not as rigid, or perhaps the political climate is not as crazy as it is in America as well. So maybe it's difficult to make global assertions at this stage, and we have to look at this much more localized. Yeah. Thanks.
Veronika Seiler. Do you have already examples for users words that were replaced with emojis in your data? Because I think it's a pretty new thing that you use by, for example, think of the grape emoji for rape, or
yes.
You have the cherries for boobs or something like that. I think it's a new thing, and I see on TikTok that there are many comments about what do you mean with grape.
Yeah.
Maybe you have ideas for this.
We didn't consider emojis at all, but there's the peaches emoji, there's obviously the eggplant emoji, there's corn, and so in some of these you have this, it's a sort of translanguaging really, because you have a word that is the target that is to be replaced, and then you have an image, but which is also linguistically realized, and the realization of the image is a paronymy of the target. Like you have corn for porn, or you say or grape for rape. And so these would tend to follow into the categories already set up by Calhoun and Fawcett. I'm sure I've seen many of these in German TikTok videos as well. I think German TikTok videos follow quite closely what happens in English in particular, but only at the graphemic level. Additional things happen because of the different graphemic constitution of words. But I would guess that on the emoji level, what we see in German data is quite close to what we see in American data. But no, we didn't look at these empirically.
One last question, one short answer.
Yeah.
Okay, very short. Just one question. There's a meme ongoing, how to spot the Gen Zer, and if they use AlgoSpeak. Could this be considered a shibboleth if they use it in private chats? So if I talk to someone, I don't know him, and there is a AlgoSpeak, isn't this like youth language kind of a giveaway, because it's not needed in a private chat? I mean, they use it in TikTok because of the algorithm, but they use it so much, it could become a shibboleth, maybe. I'm not sure. I would say yes, because I read messages like that. I was like, okay, this seems to be a giveaway about maybe the age or the, let's say, communicative practices they participate.
Yeah, well, I think that the key point is this re-indexicalization, this reinterpretation of its function. So once AlgoSpeak is not just about disguising items vis-a-vis the algorithm, it becomes something different. So it becomes a topical marker, or it's sort of, so this is what you see a lot. So it basically marks the sensitivity or the gravity of the particular topic you're talking about. And in this capacity, AlgoSpeak jumps from TikTok to Reddit, for example. So you see people using AlgoSpeak forums on Reddit and other people commenting and saying, you don't need that here, nobody's censoring these words. And from there, it can jump on. So you can certainly think about these further cycles of, let's say, distribution and shifts of function where the original function is completely lost. And at the end of this process, it's a fancy way of writing in juxtaposition to standard language writing. So yes, and this could be considered a youth language practice. But it's the end of a longer journey, so to speak. Yeah, but that's certainly possible. Yeah, thank you.
One last comment from my side. So if I would be TikTok, I would hire a computer scientist to change the algorithm to detect also the disguised forms of spam, because it's not that difficult.
Well, it's
I just can't imagine that they don't.
I think it already can. I think with AI, it already can.
I mean, it's so easy. It's 2 lines of code.
Yeah, so some of them are already taken up. I think that Lena Schröder in her coding, she has some remarks on Nazi with the @ sign is already banned. So it's a cat and mouse game where so some of the disguised forms will be banned, and then this pushes people to more disguise until the trend fades away or remorphs into just displaying your creativity and ingenuity with writing, in that sense.
And this
it is a skill. It is a skill, I think.
Sort of very random things. For example, in China, so you have things like Winnie the Pooh being banned because it was a kind of algo speak about Xi Jinping. So you have these like weird things getting banned.
So
thank you.
So we are through with today. I've passed this list for the conference dinner. I still have to call them because I said we will be 20 persons, and I suppose that the contributors will join us for the conference dinner. But I will try to call them and to make a reservation for all of you who want to join us. I will tell you tomorrow if it will be possible. Sorry for this. And we will be back here tomorrow at 9 o'clock with a keynote of Ruth Page, which can be with us here in Dresden. She will give her talk on Zoom. Yes, but it's like that. So you might follow the talk